So on to our first session. So I'm really delighted to introduce Dana Andrew. Dana works for the exhibition group, and her talk is all about using the Rethinking Touring Exhibitions Toolkit to reduce the environmental impact of exhibitions, touring and object loans. So as she's our first, can we give her a particularly big welcome? Thank you.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me as well. So my name's Dana Andrew, my pronouns are she, they, and I'm part-time professional development manager for the exhibitions group. I'm also a trainer and consultant on temporary touring and partnership exhibitions and international projects. To give a brief visual description, I'm a white person in their late 40s with curly brown hair, red glasses and a yellow t-shirt. And the session today is really to give you an overview of a toolkit, which is the Rethinking Touring Exhibitions Toolkit, not the snappiest name, and how it can help you reduce the environmental impact of your exhibition projects, whether that's loans in and out, or whether that's displays or touring. So a brief introduction to the exhibitions group before we look at the toolkit. Some of you might know us as TEG, formerly the Touring Exhibitions Group, but we changed our name in October 2014 following a strategic review to the Exhibitions Group to really give a better sense of what we're doing as an organisation, which is supporting exhibition makers across the board, whether you're working on temporary, touring or partnership exhibitions. We're a registered charity and a membership organisation, and we're dedicated to helping the exhibitions community thrive. We do this as the home of exhibition practice, and we have a learning and events programme. We do research that we then share with the wider sector for information. And we have our annual in-person event, Exhibitions Connect, which was just recently, last month, at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. So our work in preserving the past, educating the present, and shaping the future through our organisations, through our collections, through our work, has an environmental impact. And it does contribute to the planetary emergency that we're experiencing. I'm sure many of you have already completed your carbon literacy training, and I'll come back to that as a question at the end. But whether or not you've done informal training, I'm pretty sure every one of you is already doing something to reduce the impact of your work. It might be more so at the moment that it's facilities managers in your organisation that are leading on this kind of work, particularly around buildings and facilities. And sometimes when it comes to exhibitions and loans, it can feel a little bit overwhelming about where to start. That type of work involves a lot of different people, aspects, everything, so it can be really difficult to know where to start, and this is where the toolkit comes in. I want to assure you that you can make a difference. There are things that you could do within your sphere of influence, and the toolkit is here to help you ask questions, have discussions with colleagues, and start to make those step changes that over time you can build on. And we do have a responsibility to urgently respond to the planetary emergency, and one way we can do that is through our work. Particularly with exhibitions and touring, that might be the way that we plan, we develop and we tour, and how we organise our loans in and out. It might be through the stories we tell, the objects we select. It might be through the way that we tender contracts, or the decisions we make about who we work with, which contractors, and what we ask of them in terms of their environmental impact. It might also be about the choices that we make about materials, transport, travel, all those aspects that are associated with making an exhibition and potentially touring it. But where to start? So this is where the toolkit comes in and is useful. So this toolkit was published in 2024, and it was developed by the Exhibitions Group and the Design Museum in London as part of the development phase of the Art Fund Going Places programme. Going Places was an art fund programme made possible with support from the National Lottery Heritage Fund and additional support from the Esme Fairbairn Foundation. The toolkit is available to download from both the Exhibitions Group website and the Art Fund website. So when you're working on exhibitions or loans with other partners, stakeholders, lenders, it can feel difficult to know where to start with reducing your carbon footprint. So the toolkit has quite a few questions over different areas to help you decide where to start. It will signpost you to resources that you can use to measure and start collecting data to help you inform decision making, to help you advocate to stakeholders and partners. And although the toolkit was created for UK organisations developing or producing touring exhibitions using a co-collaboration model, it can actually be used for quite a variety of different aspects of work, particularly loans in and out and displays. So the toolkit was designed with small to medium-sized organisations, and it was then tested with small, medium and national museums. So you can be confident that the toolkit is going to help you regardless of the size of organisation you work in or with. And we really hope that the toolkit is going to empower you to work collaboratively, both inside and outside your organisation, to make a difference and to develop new best practice for the sector. So how to use the toolkit? The toolkit is divided into 6 sections, and each is related to a different aspect of a project. So we've got partnerships and procurement, we've got people, we've got objects, we've got content and advocacy, and we've got design, build and display. So you can dip in and out of the toolkit depending on the area you're working on at the time, or depending which stage or aspect of your project you might need a little bit of guidance or help with. And links across the top of each page allow you to navigate through the content, through the different sections quite easily. So as you can see on the slide, each section includes questions to ask yourself and your project team. Then there are considerations to discuss internally and externally, and data to collect. Each section also signposts you to useful research and resources to support your decision making. What I'd really like to emphasize is that the toolkit isn't only relevant for the planning stages of your project. You can return to this toolkit at all the different stages, from planning through to evaluation and all the practical steps in between. So of course, I don't have time to go into every single detail or area of the toolkit today, but I'll give you an overview. And just to let you know, we are working on developing some training for this in partnership with museum development providers for this financial year. So I'll give you an overview of each area and then some top tips for each one. So hopefully there's something you can take away, even if you're not getting to look through the toolkit in detail just yet. So, partnerships and procurement. This is relevant across all those different stages I already mentioned, because it does cover the early stage planning. It covers setting key project principles, data collection during the project, measuring your environmental impact, and then also what to consider at the end once you have collected your data and your project is complete. And you'll see in this section and most of the others that one of the main actions and resources is allowing sufficient time to plan, research, discuss and make decisions. So if that's one takeaway I can give you already, it's to make sure you allow time for these questions and discussions to take place. And I know that's not always challenging, not always easy, and that it can be challenging, but at least there's no financial outlay for having those questions and discussions. Cool. So our top tips for this section. Could you choose partners that are already somewhat aligned with your environmental goals? Can you find people to work with that might even be partly on the same page as you, if not completely? Can you find a way to include environmental responsibility in your agreements, contracts? There are templates available, and the exhibitions group will be providing more of those in due course. And we encourage you to share guidelines early, set out your expectations with your partners, contractors, etc., and to monitor throughout the project. So please, just like with evaluation, don't leave it till the end and try and do it retrospectively when you're then kind of trying to work out what moved where, by what method, etc., etc. Collect the data as you go along. Keep it somewhere for reference. It will make life a lot easier. The people section is also relevant to quite a few different project stages, from planning through to delivery, but also it informs policies and processes. So again, thinking about using this at different stages of your project and beyond. It's also the area where your colleagues and your staff might be most familiar with already. They might already be making changes in their personal lives to do with their choice of transport, flying less perhaps. So there's already some awareness we find with this particular section, so hopefully you're not starting from scratch. As I said, you can also use this section to help inform developing policies around travel and other aspects that affect staff and colleagues. So our top tips for this section would be to encourage and support staff to make informed travel decisions. With any of this, there's rarely a kind of right way or wrong way. You're doing the best you can with what you have in the circumstances you are in. And that might be different for different projects or different people. So it's not necessarily about kind of having a policy that says we only ever do it this way. Make sure you've got some flexibility there so that you can adapt accordingly. If possible, could you support a no courier first policy? Or if that's not possible, a virtual courier first policy wherever possible. And of course, there'll always be some exceptions, but can that be the starting point rather than the point you want to get to? And would it be possible to provide carbon literacy training for as many staff as possible? Objects. Now this is the section that might require more time for discussion with colleagues and doing a bit of advocacy for changing processes. We are very conscientious in our work and wanting to do things right. It can be really difficult to change the mindset about what is right in terms of caring for both our collections and the environment. So while that can be a challenging balance to find, it is one that you need to consider, and I do think this is one that just needs to be talked about, finding out where different colleagues stand on this, where there might be room for negotiation, finding out what other organisations are already doing. And of course, just like with couriering, there are always exceptions for particular types of objects in particular circumstances, where they're going, how they're displayed. So again, it's not that there's one way of doing this. What I would advise, and where we found organisations have either been able to do a lot of work in this area or where they found it really challenging, is where they've not talked about the object list with an environmental consideration with enough colleagues in advance. So it's very difficult if you've made your object selection, it's been agreed with conservation, with curators or whoever needs to agree that, to then look at the list retrospectively and try and do what you can to reduce the environmental impact. You really need to be thinking about this as you're making your object selection. So some of the ways that you could influence that might be by minimizing the overall number of loans in for an exhibition or display, or finding a way to borrow objects more locally, or thinking about the geographic kind of collective location of objects. Could you minimize transport distances and the number of journeys? You might consider reproductions. You might consider using objects from your own collection instead of borrowing in, or finding local loans wherever possible. It can also be really helpful to try and group objects together with environmental needs, whether that's to do with transport and packing or display. You might be, depending on the type of exhibition and building you're in, perhaps as a way that you just need to provide a particular environmental conditions for one display case or one room, as opposed to a whole exhibition, because you've got several objects dotted all over the exhibition that require quite strict environmental conditions. Transport, again, an area that people might have already done some thinking about. And certainly in our experience, we know at least the major transport agents in the UK are really putting a lot of work and a lot of thought into how they can reduce the environmental impact of transport of objects. They are very willing, in our experience, to work with you, with your organisations, to find ways to do part loads, to help maybe negotiate when you've got 10 lenders who are sharing a load and everyone wants to be last on and first off. Not everyone can, so you'll need to find a solution there. But I'd really encourage you to have these conversations with your agents. They're very interested in this area. They want to do better and are doing better in this area. So work with them. Our top tips for this area of work, so thinking about transport, is consolidation and sharing loads where possible. Can you prioritize lower impact transport options? So whilst electric vehicles are not widespread yet, there may be instances where they are available and that is suitable for your object transport. And something that we're starting to see happen already, which is super encouraging, but we'd like to see more of, is including emissions reporting in tenders and contracts with transport agents. So the more we ask, the more the transport agents are going to expect this and know to include it. As I said, a lot of them are already prepared for doing this. So speaking to them about what they can measure, what they can provide, and agreeing what that is together. So you might have very specific things that you need to measure, that you need to be able to report on. So it's really important that the transport agent understands that. They may be thinking for other clients they've had to measure different things, or for their own reporting they're focused on a different area than you are. So just kind of making sure that you've got that clarity and agreement about what is expected in terms of reporting and data collection. Content and advocacy. So this could be advocacy within your organisation. This could be advocacy to your audiences and visitors. This could be advocacy to the sector. This could be advocacy to stakeholders, funders. So you can really use this in different ways. This section will really help you plan how to communicate with your visitors and audiences your approach to reducing your environmental impact, and encourage them to consider their own impact and how to reduce it. There is very clear research out there that says our audiences are interested in what we are doing to reduce our environmental impact, that they expect to see what we're doing in terms of reducing our environmental impact. So let's find a way to give them that. Some top tips for this section include being transparent about your environmental goals with your visitors, your staff, your partners and stakeholders. It's very unlikely that we're all going to be able to do everything all at once, but it's important that we start, and it's important that we communicate even the small things we're doing. We can think about that having a ripple effect and being able to build on it. You could think about how you can educate visitors through interpretation and signage, as well as through the content of your exhibitions. And maybe there are ways, depending where you're located, I know it's not always easy, but are there ways that you can incentivize visitors to use public transport wherever possible? Design, build and display. There is a lot of information, really good stuff out there already around this, particularly from the Design Museum in London. If you go to their website, they have a decision tree for materials, a decision tree for objects that can help you navigate these particular areas. We're already seeing quite a bit of action across the sector in this area. So we've got initiatives like MuseoCycle by Museum Development North, we've got Museum Free Cycle, and we've got others which are signposted to in this section. So that can be ways for you to think about the circular economy in terms of your exhibitions, thinking about reuse and recycling at the end wherever possible. So some of our top tips here are design for reuse from the start. Think about modular plinths that you can use again. Reusable cases, so formats that are going to help you be able to reuse them in a variety of ways going forward. So we're moving away from bespoke a little bit and looking at things that will work more broadly across a wider range of exhibitions and uses. Thinking about how you can source locally, how you might be able to use more sustainable materials, and plan for end of life of your exhibition. Think about how you might be able to donate, reuse or recycle what you've produced. So that's been a quick whistle-stop tour of the toolkit, and I hope you will take the time after the M&H show to read through the toolkit, share it with your colleagues and any external partners and contractors that you're working with on your exhibitions, loans, displays or touring projects. So before we have time to move on to questions, I've got 3 key takeaways. Some of you or many of you might already be doing these things, so I might be preaching to the converted here, but start conversations early, whether that's with staff, partners, contractors, stakeholders, etc. Give yourself the best possible opportunity to make informed decisions about your projects. Encourage you to use the toolkit as a practical resource to dip in and out of it at different project stages and on the different areas as you need to. Measure and share your environmental data, both internally and externally. This is how we're going to start to see some positive change and where we can start doing some benchmarking across our work with other organisations. It's the way we're going to start to develop a new best practice in this area. And I'd like to finish with one call to action, which is, can you start within your sphere of influence, within the area of work that you do, what small change could you make to reduce the environmental impact of your work? These small changes can add up, create momentum, create that ripple effect, not only within your project teams, but within organisations, within the sector and with all the people that you're working with. Cool. So I've got a couple, before we go on to questions, I've got 3 quick poll questions. So I'd like you to raise your hand in response to these. So I'd like to know how many here have heard of the Gallery Climate Coalition calculator? Oh, brilliant, quite a few. If not, I suggest go and have a look at that. It's a brilliant tool and it is designed for, particularly for exhibition making or our sector. How many of you are already calculating the carbon footprint of your exhibitions or displays? A few less, but we've definitely got some. That's brilliant. And how many of you have already had carbon literacy training? Oh, fantastic. Thank you. So that's all from me, but we've got time, I think, for questions, and I think there's some microphones as well.
Thank you, Dana. That really, really interesting talk. So if we can just quickly give her a round of applause, say thank you. And I'm sure there's lots of questions out there. So Julia and myself have a microphone. So if you raise your hand to ask a question.
Hello, my name is Olivia. I'm from Museum Development Midlands.
Oh, I can't hear.
Oh, hello.
Do I? Thanks.
Is that working?
Oh, no, I can't. I think because I've got this on, it's all like an old radio. Should I? I don't know.
I could ask it and someone could pass
Sorry?
it on.
Oh, I'll go and stand there then.
Hello? Is that working? Brilliant. I work with a lot of small and medium-sized museums, and I think a lot of people are really interested in doing this work but face barriers, maybe like internally or externally. So you talked about developing the toolkit with museums.
Yeah.
I just wondered, what were there sort of frequent barriers that the museums were coming up against, and if there were ways that you sort of supported them with those barriers, or things that they found were really useful?
Yeah, so I'll move back over to, otherwise I'm talking in my own ear. What we found was that particularly with smaller museums, they were already doing more than some of the larger museums. That was mainly driven by costs more than anything else, so that might not be a surprise. You probably won't be surprised either that local authority museums found it sometimes a bit of a challenge because responsibility for environmental impact might have been with a particular person that wasn't very connected with the museum side of things or the culture side of things, and that they had very, I guess, processes that weren't very flexible or might have to use particular tools, and so they were finding it was a bit challenging sometimes to align with that to be able to do what they wanted to do. And what was the other? I mean, then there's the capacity thing, which is no surprise to anyone. So I think that's when we were testing it and developing it. That's why you'll see in the toolkit, it's not a lot of you must do this and you must do that, or we really recommend this or we really recommend that, because we found the only way things were going to happen and change were for the organisations to figure out what they actually could do, even if it was a small thing, and to really encourage people to, because we're always talking about benchmarking within the sector, but it's also realising that you just need to do what you need to do, what you can do, and that might look different to what a similar size organisation is doing because of their governance model or because of other factors. So yes, absolutely, I'm not saying this is plain sailing and easy, but we did actually find the smaller museums were really getting there with some of it. Thanks.
Okay, so any more questions from anybody? Anyone else want to ask anything? I've got a question for you, Dana, so I'll stand beside you to ask it. So at PLB, we looked at a greener design initiative back in about 2011. Why is our sector so slow to pick up on sustainability, environmental awareness, do you think?
I mean, we could say the same about digital before it and other things before that. So I think as a sector, as I said before, we're so diligent about doing things the right way and there being this kind of idea of what best practice is. I think it's really challenging when you view that as a professional responsibility to be moving away from that in a way that might be perceived by others as taking potentially less care of collections. And I think that can be really difficult to do because we know we have this kind of dual responsibility. Like, okay, if we don't think about the environment, then, well, won't matter collections because we won't be here. But equally, we've got this kind of utmost responsibility to collections, and finding that balance is difficult, and challenging what we've always done, I think, is even harder. And that's why we encourage people to kind of share what they're doing, even small things, because then we can really start to make collective change. And I think there's a bit of momentum been growing maybe in the last 3 years. And like you said, there's been work done a long time ago in this, and we didn't really go anywhere with it. But I think we're starting to see a little bit of momentum now.
Great.
I have some hope.
Are there any more questions out there? There's one at the back. There's a microphone there.
Hello, I'm Paul Wolf from the Mary Rose. Just to follow up on what you were saying, I think the demands of grant funders to deal with this issue has forced people to take more notice than previously. I think that's probably why this is now higher up the agenda.
Thank you. Are there any more questions out there? So can I ask those of you that just listened to Dana talk, who's going to go away? Just raise your hands if you're going to go away and have a review of how you might deliver the next exhibition or service. Brilliant. Thank you. Can we give another round of applause to Dana? That's been excellent. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.